Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into what is honestly a massive paradigm shift in how we understand mental health. We're zooming way down, deep inside our cells to uncover a hidden engine that literally drives our moods, our resilience, and our minds.
Okay, let's get right into this medical mystery. Because for, roughly 20 years, we basically blamed depression almost entirely on a single neurotransmitter, serotonin. The whole idea was just, you either didn't have enough or your brain cleared it out too fast. But what if everything we knew about depression was really only half the story? Because recent science has found a totally different culprit.
Just mapping out the timeline, you can see how incredibly fast things have changed. In the 2000s, it was all about the serotonin theory. The 2010s hit, and we shifted our focus to the gut microbiome and genetics. And now, in the 2020s, the focus is squarely on mitochondrial dysfunction. We're realizing the root of a lot of these struggles traces right down to the cellular level.
So, Section 1. Meet your cellular powerhouses. And yeah, they are way more than just the powerhouse of the cell.
You probably remember mitochondria from high school biology, right? Those little sausage-shaped organelles responsible for cellular energy production, making ATP. But they are actually wild. They contain their own fast-mutating circular DNA, which is maternally inherited, by the way. They act almost like independent little organisms living right inside us.
And they do way more than just make ATP. They're basically the gatekeepers for cell death, apoptosis. They synthesize heme for your blood. They synthesize steroid hormones like estrogen and testosterone. On top of that, they store and release calcium for signal transduction, and, this is super important for later, they produce reactive oxygen species, or ROS. They're managing the whole shebang.
Now, keep this number in your head, 20%. The human brain is relatively small, but it hogs a staggering 20% of your body's total energy supply. So your neurons are incredibly dependent on these little power plants just to function day to day. To put that into perspective, high-level thinking is just incredibly metabolically expensive. A healthy brain is rapidly switching back and forth between resting and active cognitive networks. But a stressed brain? It gets stuck in the default mode network. It literally just lacks the efficient ATP energy availability to flip the switch, which can trap you in those rigid, negative thought loops we associate with depression. Which perfectly tees up Section 2, the stress energy crisis, when the power grid gets overloaded.
So let's walk through this vicious cycle of chronic stress. Step 1. Chronic stress creates excess reactive oxygen species. Basically, it's cellular exhaust. Step 2. That ROS actually damages the delicate, fast-mutating mitochondrial DNA. Step 3. Because of the damage, the overall ATP energy output drops. And finally, Step 4. Inflammation spikes. It's a brutal, devastating feedback loop of fatigue and burnout. And here is where it gets absolutely fascinating. When that mitochondrial DNA gets so damaged that it leaks out, it acts as a danger-associated molecular pattern, or a DAMP. Basically, your immune system sees it, thinks it's a dangerous bacterial infection, and triggers this massive systemic inflammation and what researchers call sickness behavior. We're talking extreme fatigue, pulling away socially, the classic signs of major depression.
This leads directly to the kynurenine pathway consequence. That systemic inflammation activates microglia, your brain's immune cells. The resulting cytokines inhibit new neuron growth. And then the tryptophan that your body normally uses to make serotonin. It actually gets diverted away from serotonin production entirely. It shifts toward making a neurotoxic compound called quinolinic acid instead. Your brain's chemistry is literally being hijacked by inflammation.
Okay, I know that's heavy. But Section 3, mitochondria on the move. Cellular rescue missions in the brain.
So we used to think mitochondria were permanently stuck inside their individual cells. Nope. It turns out they can physically travel through things called tunneling nanotubes, or TNTs. These are incredibly thin actin-based membranous channels that physically bridge cells together over surprisingly long distances so they can transfer materials.
I love how Zamberlan and Simonzadar described this in their 2025 paper, Intercellular Highways for the Direct Transfer of Materials. It perfectly captures the image of healthy support cells, like astrocytes, literally shipping their own fresh mitochondria over to sick, exhausted neurons to restore their power and keep them from dying.
And they're not just using those nanotube highways. These power plants are highly mobile. They squeeze through the TNTs, they circulate completely freely in the bloodstream, they get packed inside tiny extracellular vesicles, and they're even released by platelets following inflammation. So when researchers see elevated cell-free mitochondrial DNA in depressed patients, it might not just be damage. It could literally be a cellular distress signal calling for a rescue mission.
All right, moving to Section 4, the gender energy divide, how male and female cells handle stress differently. Because you inherit mitochondrial DNA strictly from your mother, the biological differences here are striking. Let's compare them. For stress response, female biology leans into adaptive protection and repair, while male biology shows elevated metabolic stress. For energy output, female cells actually decrease respiration to protect the system from burning out, whereas male cells stubbornly preserve their OXPHOS activation. They just push through. And for a hormonal shield, female cells use estrogen receptors, specifically ER-beta, to buffer that ROS damage, while male cells rely on androgens, which honestly provide a much less defined safety net.
So what do we actually do with all this? Section 5, Powering Up Your Mitochondria. Interventions for the Cellular Power Grid.
Let's look at the actual modulators of mitochondrial health. Exercise is absolutely huge here. It releases exokines that promote biogenesis, boosts SIRT3 expression, and amps up BDNF. Then you have photobiomodulation, where red and near-infrared light actually stimulates an enzyme called cytochrome C oxidase right in the cells. Ketamine is another one, promoting rapid synaptic plasticity via the MTR pathway, which requires a ton of cellular energy. And of course, antidepressants, which have very complex, dose-dependent effects like inhibiting MAO.
And just to double-click on those traditional SSRI antidepressants, they really do have a complex relationship with your mitochondria. At high doses, they can actually inhibit energy complexes, potentially slowing the power grid down. But on the flip side, they protect your neurotransmitters by blocking those MAO enzymes on the outside of the mitochondria. It really highlights why these meds are an absolute lifesaver for some, but don't work for everybody. It all depends on your cellular power grid.
So I'll leave you with this provocative thought to ponder. If our mental health is so deeply tied to our cellular engines, how does changing our physical movement fundamentally rewrite our emotional state? The mind and the body aren't separate things. They share the exact same power grid. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and keep exploring the amazing biology running just beneath the surface.